Let's get right into it. Number 10. Decimation's brutal math. So your boss just announced they're decimating the budget. Everyone thinks that means they're destroying it completely, but your boss is actually being way less harsh than the Romans were. Decimation comes from the Latin word decimatio, and it's probably the most metal math lesson in history. You're a Roman commander, and your soldiers just ran away from battle like a bunch of scared chickens. You line them all up and make them count off by tens. Every 10th person steps forward. They're actually getting executed by their own buddies. The Romans would kill exactly 1 out of every 10 soldiers as punishment for cowardice. That's where we get the deci part. It means 10th in Latin. So when your unit got decimated, it meant exactly 10% of you were about to have a really bad day. The other 90% had to watch, which was a horrifying deterrent designed to ensure it never happened again. So next time your boss says they're decimating the budget, you can be that annoying person who says, "Oh, so you're only cutting it by 10%? When someone says they're decimating something nowadays, they usually mean they're destroying a large part of it. But originally, it was a very specific, very brutal fraction. Number 9. School, the place of leisure. The word school comes from the ancient Greek word skol, and skol means leisure, free time, doing absolutely nothing productive. Yes, the place where you stress about pop quizzes and sit through dreaded exams was named after chilling out. It's like naming a prison vacation villa, or calling your dentist's office the fun zone. In ancient Greece, only the wealthy elite had the luxury of free time. The poor folks were too busy trying not to starve to death to sit around and ponder the meaning of life or the secrets of the universe. So skol became associated with learning because that's what rich people did in their spare time. It's like how nowadays, some people spend their free time watching TikTok, except instead of dance challenges, they were debating philosophy. Fast forward a few thousand years, and we've masterfully turned this place of leisure into something that gives millions of teenagers anxiety dreams. So next time you're sitting in class stressing about a test, just remember you're technically supposed to be in a place of leisure. See if that helps. It probably won't. Number 8. A juggernaut will crush you. The word juggernaut, which we use for any massive and unstoppable force, comes from ancient India, and a story that isn't quite what it seems. In the city of Puri, there's a massive annual festival for a form of the god Krishna, known as Juggernaut. The star of the show is a giant wooden chariot, a ratha, carrying the idol of Juggernaut. This massive wooden cart stood as tall as a 3-story building, with huge wooden wheels, each one bigger than a person. According to sensationalized accounts from British colonials in the 18th and 19th centuries, devotees would get so caught up in religious fervor that they'd throw themselves under these massive moving wheels. They claimed the chariot would crush these worshippers like bugs on a windshield. The British started using juggernaut to describe any unstoppable force that crushes everything in its path. But here's the thing, most of those British accounts were heavily exaggerated, if not outright fabricated. Sure, accidents could happen when maneuvering a multi-ton wooden cart through a crowd of thousands of excited people, but the idea of devotees deliberately getting crushed as an act of faith was mostly colonial propaganda. They used these shocking stories to paint Indian religious practices as barbaric and primitive, justifying their own colonial presence in the country. So, while the word came from a real festival, its modern meaning was born from a mix of awe, misunderstanding, and deliberate misrepresentation. Number 7. Sinister is your unlucky left side. Ever called something sinister? Well, congratulations. You just spoke ancient Latin and accidentally insulted every left-handed person in the room. The word sinister originally just meant on the left side in Latin, nothing more. But the Romans had some serious prejudices about the left side. They believed the left was inherently evil, unlucky, and untrustworthy. If a bird flew by on your left side, it was considered a bad omen. If you tripped with your left foot, your day was ruined. Roman augurs, priests who read the future, would base their entire prophecies on which side things happened on. Left was always bad news. This wasn't just a Roman thing. The prejudice is deep in many languages. The French word for left is gauche, which in English also means awkward or socially clumsy. But if you're skilled, you're adroit, from the French adroit, meaning to the right. In English, we say someone is right when they're correct. You have rights. If you're skilled, you're dexterous, from the Latin word dexter, which means right-handed. This bias lasted way longer than the Roman Empire. Well into the 20th century, some schools were still forcing left-handed kids to write with their right hands, believing it was a defect that needed to be corrected. So yeah, every time you call a movie villain sinister, You're keeping alive a 2,000-year-old superstition against left-handed people. Number 6. Avocado, chocolate, and tomato. You're sitting there, enjoying your avocado toast, maybe sipping some hot chocolate, and cutting up a tomato for a salad. In that one moment, you're actually speaking Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. That green stuff you're paying $15 for at a hipster cafe is ahuacatl in Nahuatl. That chocolate you're drinking is zocolotl. The Aztecs drank it bitter and spicy, often mixed with chili peppers. They believed it was a gift from Quetzalcoatl, their feathered serpent god, and it was more valuable than gold. A tomato is tomatl in classical Nahuatl. They also had zitamatl, which meant plump thing with a navel. The list goes on. Coyote is from coyotl. Chili is from chili. Chipotle comes from chilpoctli, meaning smoked chili. Every time you order a burrito bowl, you're speaking a 500-year-old language from a fallen empire. Guacamole is from aguacamole, which literally just means avocado sauce. The Aztec Empire may have fallen, but its language survived by embedding itself into an unstoppable global force, our food. Number 5. Checkmate is a dead king. Every time you corner your opponent's king and win a game of chess, you're actually announcing a royal death sentence in ancient Persian. That smug little checkmate you say is from the Persian phrase Shah Mat, which literally means the king is dead. Chess originated in India around the 6th century, but it was in Persia that it was refined and given the terminology we recognize today. Imagine being a Persian king, just chilling in your palace, and hearing your guards yell Shah Mat across the courtyard. That's probably not a phrase that helps you sleep at night. The word check itself comes from Shah, meaning king. When you say check, you're essentially shouting king at your opponent, a warning that their monarch is under attack. You're saying, "Heads up, your majesty, you might want to move your royal behind." The game was so popular in Persia that its vocabulary spread across the world, from the Arab world to Europe. Even the word chess itself comes from Shah. So next time you're playing chess and someone says checkmate, you can be that annoying friend who says, "Actually, you just declared my king's death in ancient Persian." A bit dramatic, don't you think? Number 4. Disaster is a bad star. We all have those days where absolutely everything goes wrong. You wake up late, your car won't start, you spill coffee all over your shirt, and your phone decides to take a swim in the toilet. Back in ancient times, people would have blamed all of that on the stars. The word disaster comes to us from Italian disastro, which itself comes from Latin. It literally means bad star. The dis part is a prefix meaning bad or away from, and astro means star. A disaster is literally when the stars are aligned against you. Ancient people, especially the Greeks and Romans, were obsessed with astrology. They believed the alignment of stars and planets controlled everything from a person's fate to the outcome of battles. So when something terrible and unexpected happened, they would look up at the sky and say, "Mars is being a jerk again," or "That comet clearly has it in for me." It's the ancient version of saying, "Mercury is in retrograde," when you accidentally send an embarrassing email to your entire office. The Romans had professional stargazers on the state payroll. These guys, called augurs, would check the stars before any major decision. Going to war? Check the stars. Getting married? Check the stars. Building a new aqueduct? You better believe they checked the stars. At least they had someone cosmic to blame. These days, when disaster strikes, we have to blame boring stuff like human error or just plain old bad luck. Number 3. Salary. Every time you get a paycheck or complain about your paycheck, you're speaking ancient Roman. The word salary comes straight from the Latin word salarium, which literally means salt money. In ancient Rome, salt wasn't just that stuff you shake on your fries. It was basically ancient Bitcoin. It was an incredibly valuable commodity. Without refrigerators, salt was the only reliable way to preserve food, especially meat. This made it essential for feeding a city, and more importantly, for feeding an army on the march. Roman soldiers were often paid, at least in part, with a ration of salt. This payment was the salarium. These guys had to be worth their salt, and that is exactly where that phrase comes from. If a soldier was a good one, he was worth his salt. If he was a poor soldier, he was not worth his salt. Salt was such a big deal that the Romans built one of their very first great roads just to transport it. It was called the Via Salaria, which literally means the salt road. It ran from the salt pans at the mouth of the Tiber River all the way to Rome. That's like building an entire interstate highway just for ketchup packets. So as you look at your next pay stub and see how much the government took out, just remember, at least they're paying you in cash, not in a bag of salt. Number 2. Nightmare. Ever woken up with a terrifying feeling, gasping for air, like something heavy was sitting on your chest holding you down? Our ancestors called that a mare, and not the horse kind. In Old English and Germanic folklore, a mare was a malevolent spirit, a nasty little goblin that would sneak into your room at night, sit on your chest, and give you bad dreams. The mare, in Nightmare, has absolutely nothing to do with horses. It comes from an old Germanic word, mara, which refers to this specific type of sleep-ruining goblin. The mare would paralyze you, crush the breath from your lungs, and feed on your terror. What's truly fascinating is that people across different cultures, all over the world, reported the exact same terrifying experience. In Thailand, they blamed it on a ghost called Phi Am. In Turkey, it was the Karabasan. In Newfoundland, they called it the Old Hag. Different names, same creepy chest-sitting demon. Today, we know this phenomenon is actually sleep paralysis. During REM sleep, your brain paralyzes your body, presumably so you don't physically act out your dreams. Sometimes, your mind wakes up before the paralysis wears off. You're conscious, but you can't move. Your brain, in its panic, fills in the blanks with the scariest explanation possible, a malevolent presence holding you down. So when you say you had a nightmare, you're not just saying you had a bad dream. You're literally invoking the name of a demon sitting on your chest. Number 1. Mortgage. You're signing a thick stack of papers at a bank, getting ready to buy a home. You think it's just some boring financial paperwork? You're actually participating in an ancient death pledge. The word mortgage comes from two words in Old French, mort, meaning death, and gage, meaning pledge. It is, quite literally, a death pledge. It was a promise that only ends in one of two ways, when the debt is finally paid off or when the borrower dies. Back then, failing to pay your mortgage had consequences that were a lot darker than foreclosure notices. You could lose everything you owned, your land, your home, your possessions, and in some cases, your freedom. Some medieval borrowers who defaulted on their loans would actually end up in indentured servitude, forced to work for their lenders until the debt was settled. The death part of the pledge also referred to the idea that the pledge itself dies when the loan is finally paid off. But in medieval times, with shorter lifespans and less social mobility, most people who took out a mortgage never lived to see it fully paid. So when they called it a death pledge, they weren't just being dramatic. For many, it was a debt they would carry to their grave. Even today, with a standard 30-year mortgage, many people spend nearly their entire adult working life paying it off. So congratulations, you're making a death pledge, just like your ancestors did centuries ago. The only difference is that now, the bank sends you strongly worded letters instead of sending knights with swords. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.